This conference will now be recorded.
So welcome all to the Arlington Democratic Senior Lunch. I am Robert Platt, and just as a first order of business, I thought we would hear from Connor Murnane of the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, FIRE, who wants to tell us about how they've expanded their organization's scope. Uh, Connor previously, before coming to FIRE, worked for ACTA. So I will now give you Connor Murnane.
Thank you, Bob. I won't bore you. I know there's a much more interesting speaker to come after me. But like Bob said, I'm Connor Murnane. I work for FIRE, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression. I'm the Senior Alumni Relations Officer, so that's a somewhat fancy title. I work with trustees, college donors, alumni on a grassroots level. That's how I met Bob, to bring pro-expression reform to college campuses. So please don't hesitate to ask me any questions throughout this talk or contact me via email. My email is connor.murnane@thefire.org, and I'm sure Bob is more than willing to share my contact information with any of you. I should also state that up front, I've worked very hard in my career to not be a lawyer. No offense to Bob, the esteemed Commonwealth attorney who you're all here to actually hear speak, or any other lawyer who may be on this call, but my law career lasted for all of a semester. I took constitutional law and I fell in love with business law. Next semester quickly ended that romance. So let me give you a brief history of FIRE. Back in 1998, two undergrad roommates from Princeton of different political backgrounds decided to get together and write a book. That was University of Pennsylvania history professor Alan Charles Kors and Boston Civil Liberties lawyer Harvey A. Silverglate. They wrote The Shadow University, The Betrayal of Liberty on America's College Campuses. This book examined what they thought to be a covert system of justice on college campuses and exposed widespread reliance on kangaroo courts, arbitrary punishment to coerce students and faculty into conformity, and other case studies. In response to this book, they received hundreds of pleas for help from students and faculty who college administrations used illiberal policies and double standards to violate their rights. Alan and Harvey, couldn't handle that with just the two of them, so they created FIRE to defend and sustain the individual rights of students and faculty on campus. Today, FIRE is still defending the basic rights of students and faculty through litigation, and we're now the leading educator on the philosophy and history of freedom of expression, due process, and academic freedom. And when I say we are the leading defender of individual rights on campus, I truly mean that. We will defend the rights of any student, faculty member, or staff, regardless of their viewpoint or identity. To this point, we've defended Democrats, Republicans, Libertarians, Democratic Socialists, those who affiliate with no party at all, Muslims, Jews, Christians, atheists, and more, individuals on both sides of essentially every major issue our nation encounters. We once even offered our assistance to a group of Satanists that were denied recognition on their campus and then couldn't get funding for any events, but they rejected our offer because apparently our morals didn't align with theirs. I can only hope that earned me points with the big man upstairs. Just last week, for a better example, a FIRE staff member wrote 2 articles in 2 days about 2 separate cases we just got involved in. And let me just read you the headlines real fast. The first one was instructor investigated on leave for Facebook post blaming the devil for Pride event. And then the next was San Diego Mesa College violates academic freedom, investigates professor for essay example associating GOP with fascism. I really couldn't have, I didn't have to dig deep to find the perfect example. So, at the end of the day, if expression is protected by the First Amendment, FIRE will defend it, period. We have never and will never comment on the content of the speech, only its status under the Constitution. And like Bob mentioned, we recently expanded off campus. So on June 6th of this year, we changed our name from the Foundation for Individual Rights and Education to the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, and expanded our scope off of campus. We decided it was time to do this, and we'll now vigorously advocate for free speech in the court of law and the court of public opinion, because we recognize that the benefits of a free speech cannot be fully realized if they're not supported by the culture and the law. What happens on campus doesn't just stay on campus anymore. So if we don't cultivate this culture of free speech, our legal freedoms will be lost. As Judge Learned Hand put it, liberty lies in the hearts of men and women. When it dies there, no constitution, no law, no court can even do much to help it. So if we want to preserve democracy for tomorrow, we recognize we have to mount a robust defense of free speech rights in culture today. We just felt it was necessary in time after 2 decades. So when I keep saying free speech culture, it is this belief in the power of free inquiry and open discussion for human progress and freedom. In order for the benefits of free speech to be fully realized, free speech must be supported by the culture and the law. And you can litigate all you want, but you can't litigate or legislate cultural change. We kid ourselves if we believe our legal freedoms will survive if our free speech culture is undermined by the institutions entrusted to educate future citizens, leaders, lawyers, or judges. So with this expansion off campus, we have three primary areas of focus: litigation, public education, and research. So we launched a 3-year plan in June with the goal of hitting about a $75 million mark. And I can happily say we're well over 40 million after, what is that, couple months? I should have written that down. And most of this comes from individual donors across the political spectrum. Any civil liberties nonprofit, you should base the health of your organization based on the diversity of your, funders and how many small dollars they are. And we pride ourselves on that number. And this expansion doesn't mean we're ignoring our higher education work anymore. In fact, our higher education team of 70 or so people will continue to remain focused on higher ed. I'm not leaving higher education, for example, but we're planning to grow our staff to about 135 people by April of 2023. And those new staffers will predominantly be dedicated to off-campus work. We're already up to about 95 or so. In addition, we also launched a $10 million nationwide advertising campaign to promote and educate on this culture of free expression, and then generate support from those that may not be aware of the issue. We called the campaign Faces of Free Speech, and it's going to last until the end of 2022. So far, we've run ads featuring individuals from all political persuasions and their battles to protect free speech. Green Army Berets getting involved with the Colin Kaepernick kneeling. He was the Green Beret that actually spoke with Kaepernick, and Kaepernick asked, "Will you come kneel with me?" And this Green Beret said, "I can't do that, but I will stand next to you and show that your protest is acceptable." The campaign is going to reach Americans on all major news networks, utilizing digital advertising and billboards also across the country in some of our most populated cities. We have some in Boston, New York, Chicago, Miami, and the list goes on. And I've given this, a version of this talk a few times now. And just to cover my rear before I get the, are you trying to compete with the ACLU? Or, the question, is this a recognition that they've backed away from free speech work? I want to nip that in the bud. We regularly work with the ACLU on campus, and we've looked forward to doing so off campus as well. Furthermore, 2 ACLU presidents sit on our board and advisory committee and have been instrumental in this expansion off campus. And our focus is never going to leave free speech, free expression. The ACLU works in about 19 different issue areas now, and how the ACLU prioritizes its work and where it directs its limited resources is going to be more complex than it is for FIRE. And the ACLU itself recognized this. Bill Wisner, who runs the ACLU's Free Speech Project, acknowledged in an interview with the New York Times, and FIRE had taken a strong lead on campus. And he stated, quote, "FIRE does not have the same tensions. At the ACLU, free speech is one of 12 or 15 different values." So since our expansion, we've launched a number of cases off campus with more to come, but the focus is continually around this free speech, free expression, and the basic principles. Some of the highlights include our challenge to Florida's Stop Woke Act due to how it limits professors' ability to teach about race and sex, as well as our defense of an autistic-led advocacy group against a controversial Boston area institution that was recently condemned for torture by the United Nations for using electric shock devices on its residents. So while we're going beyond the classroom and the quad, our single issue focus will never waver. We're still here to protect free speech rights of those who need it and to educate the next generation to ensure, long-term protections for our civil liberties. And I don't want to continue rambling, but I'm happy to talk or answer any questions any of you may have.
Steve?
Yeah, it sounds like a great, idea and work you're doing. The real issue today, it seems to be, we're having to define, the influence of, you want to have free speech on like social media, but where do you draw the line between free speech and abuse and using it to spread hate and violence? So that's
there's plenty of judicial precedent. I'm sure. Again, I'm not a lawyer. I work in outreach communications. Bringing programs to campus, but there is established precedent on everything from what is, insightful speech, what is harassment. One of the biggest issues we get to on campus with speech codes is definitions of harassment. Vague wording, or the issue of, who gets to decide what harassment is. Well, the Supreme Court in the Davis case gave a standard, right? Severe, pervasive, and it goes on. So we just look at precedent. I always hate that because it sounds like a cop out answer, but when I say we are by the book, we are as by the book as we can be, and that is as far as we'll take comments on any type of individual speech issue.
Do you think there is a role for regulation of social media? I mean, do you think it's an open forum, or do you think it's a publisher?
Depends on the company, right? So let me can you shoot me an email after this? We've written essays and essays on this, and I would love to pass that along. We actually sent a letter to Musk when that news broke, and that's been quite a thing. So I'll let our president speak for me on that one.
Yeah, well, I'll get it to you, but I'm a little late. I always have my email memory fill up, so I'll have to remove 1,000 emails before I can send it. But I will
Not
do
a
it.
problem. I'll get that your way.
But I do think that it's very important to note that the FIRE website, which is literally thefire.org, has a terrific set of resources on a wide variety of these topics, and most of the key Supreme Court cases on free speech. It's a real reference work. You should look at it, thefire.org. Mark, did you have a question?
Sorry, Bob. Just to build off that, we keep what we call our First Amendment library. So any of these issues, is hate speech legal? Now we're adding, Twitter, social media issues, but we keep a log of all relevant court cases connected to current day issues. So any of that you're looking for is going to be found on thefire.org as well.
Right, Mark.
You're coming through a little bit fuzzy. Bob kind of answered that, but give me the name of your organization again and the website.
The Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, and the website is thefire.org.
TheFire, okay.
Yeah, when we rebranded, we really didn't want to give up that acronym. We just thought that it was too good. We get the "you can't shout fire in a crowded theater" jokes far too often.
Thank you.
Steve, did you have something, or was that just a flash of green across your screen?
Steve? I was asking the same thing Marx was asking about. Was it the or D fire? It couldn't.
No, THEFIRE.
Exactly. Great.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Connor. We really appreciate you stepping up and giving us that introduction.
No problem. Sorry you had to see the side of my bedroom. If I had more of a heads up, I would have done a little something more formal.
Yeah. Well, we understand and we appreciate it. But speaking about the next person with a great backdrop, we have Parisa Tafti, our Commonwealth's attorney for both Arlington County and the City of Falls Church. And she is currently coming into her third year of her first term in that job. And she's also been very helpful in the joint campaign of the ACDC. So we invited her to speak. She's spoken to us before, but I give you Parisa. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bob, for asking me to be here, and thank you everybody for being here. It's good to be amongst friends. Well, I always like to start with our mission, and I'll read it to you very quickly. The Office of the Commonwealth's Attorney for Arlington County and the City of Falls Church pursues justice holistically on behalf of victims, defendants, and all members of the community. We prioritize public safety, transparency, and accountability. We strive to incorporate data-driven practices to inform our policies while also seeking restoration by engaging with victims of crime and the community to repair harm. This is, to say that we take a holistic view of public safety, and one that goes far beyond simply prosecuting people, and incorporates into it community well-being, fairness, and justice. And so the idea is to have safety and justice as complementary values, to take serious crime seriously, to take care of victims' needs, to hold defendants accountable in ways that are actively accountable, to treat people fairly, and to be transparent in the community. I'm sorry, is something? Okay. Just making sure nobody needed to say something. Um, to that end, we have been hard at work, and I'm going to handling our dockets, increasing transparency, and ensuring better paths to justice and accountability, as well as trying to address some of the racial disparities we have. So I'm going to first sort of talk about some of the achievements in terms of, what people think of generally as prosecution. But then I want to shift over to talking about some of the transformative justice work that we've done, how we've become more transparent and responsive, and the future challenges that we face in doing that. So I want to,
Excuse me,
yeah,
Parisa, might mention probably everybody should be muted unless they're talking because you get all this background noise, which I think distracted you a minute ago.
thank you.
Right.
Well, while we've worked to make the system equitable and fair, I haven't lost sight of the fact that everyone in Arlington, everyone on this call, including me, wants to live in a community that's safe, that, where we can, walk places with our family, where we can use our trails, where we can lead lives that are free of worry that we will be victims of crime. And to me, that means taking crime seriously. And to that end, what I can tell you is about, we've had a number of murder trials and sentencing where, we won and asked for what we thought were fair sentences. We have, asked for very serious and very long sentences. I said I would never seek the death penalty, but we have come across some cases where people were seriously harming children, and didn't recognize that that's what they were doing was wrong, and so we've asked for lengthy sentences in those cases. We've asked for lengthy sentences to incapacitate people where they've been convicted of being serial rapists. So we have taken those kinds of cases extremely seriously. We've also taken very seriously, um, uh, the process of investigative grand juries, so that we can have community input and community investigation in some of the work that we do, and really hear from the community about what we should be prosecuting, and what their thoughts are, sort of in advance of actually bringing charges. We've taken our carjackings, which have been very few, very seriously. And I actually, when the car thefts were going up, I encouraged ACPD to join a regional task force to handle the car thefts, and they did. And once we sort of combined our prosecutorial efforts with the region, and our police department's investigative efforts with the region, we saw a significant drop in car thefts. And to ACPD's credit, when they've done educational programming and high visibility enforcement, when we were having a series of carjackings over the course of a few months, and they responded by making sure that there were visible cars on the way out of Arlington, and that they were putting flyers on people's cars to tell them, don't leave your car on with your car keys inside and your car unlocked, and don't double park, leave your car on and like start looking at your phone. When they started doing that, and then also watching, we saw a significant drop. And so I've tried to encourage investigative efforts to reduce crime, because the biggest deterrent by far is the certainty of getting caught. And so, I've tried to support ACPD in those efforts. This is going to sound a little strange, but I'm also proud of the cases we haven't prosecuted. And for example, there was a particular rape case where we sought a dismissal, because, to my assistant's credit, when she, started really following some of the like loose ends in the investigation, she realized that the person who was the complaining witness had actually had multiple false allegations in multiple different jurisdictions. And so, based on the fact that there were demonstrably, false allegations, we determined that a crime hadn't happened. And so it's not normal for a prosecutor to say, well, I'm proud of not prosecuting a case, but I am proud of not prosecuting cases where we think that a crime wasn't committed, even if we've already charged, and even if we're midway through. Preventing a wrongful conviction at any stage is really important. So I'm also proud of that work that we've done and the diligence that it shows. I'm also proud of the way we prosecute cases, and some of this is inside baseball, but we started out with immediately changing our discovery practices. It used to be the case that people had to come into the office and take notes. Defense attorneys had to come into the office and take notes on files. And we immediately changed that and got the technology and the tools that we needed to provide electronic discovery as soon as possible. We still have improvements that we need to make. We still can speed up the process, I think, more and have work to do in that area. But we've come a very long way from having defense attorneys come in like school children to take notes on the cases. We also went to a model of vertical prosecution, which means that one prosecutor gets a case in the early life of the case, and then continues with that case, barring maternity leave and leaving the office and things like that. But the case tends to stick with an attorney, so that the police know who to reach out to, so that victims know who the attorney is, so that they don't have to keep repeating the story over and over again, and so that institutional knowledge isn't lost, in between steps. And in terms of like procedural justice, we have stopped asking for cash bail. We've never once asked for cash bail. We have always asked for people to be released on conditions that would ensure their return to court if we thought that they were not a danger to themselves or the community. And if we think that they're a danger to themselves or the community, we've asked for them to be held. And even while doing that, we've reduced the jail population by 30% and kept it at historic lows, without seeing a significant increase in people not showing up, which sort of tracks with what we know about the fact that cash bail actually doesn't have an effect. What does have an effect, and which I think which I would love to see implemented by the sheriff's office, is better pretrial supervision. I would love to see text message reminders for court, and using technology to communicate better with people who are in the community. And I'd love to see people better supported in the community by networks that would help them get on a track of rehabilitation more quickly. But we are, ensuring that people are, getting out as much as possible, consistent with safety, and looking for ways to do it even better. And we are also doing diversion for safety, because what we know from studies and from meta studies is that incarceration actually contributes to creating more crime. So it's what's called criminogenic. And there's a point at which incarceration has diminishing returns, where the longer you're in, the more likely you are to recidivate. And I'm not talking about the serial rape cases where I, charged a person with a life sentence, or somebody who repeatedly over the course of years was harming children. I'm talking about 95% of the people who end up getting back out. And so, what I've been looking for, and what my team has been doing, is researching and developing and working with organizations to create diversion programs so that we reduce recidivism. Because when you reduce recidivism, ultimately you're reducing crime. Ultimately, you're reducing the number of victims that are out there, and ultimately you're actually creating a more solid community structure, and a better economic situation for the community. So some of the things that we've done is we helped create a behavioral health docket, which provides wraparound services for high-risk, high-need individuals with mental health or developmental disabilities to ensure that they're not criminalized for what they can't control, which is a health issue. It's actually I'm just like, I am constantly tickled that it is over capacity and that everybody is trying to create more capacity in the behavioral health docket. We have more people that can benefit from it, and I would, I'd be happy if we could commit more resources, and by we, I mean the county, to do that. We have worked on youth diversion. We are working closely with the court services unit, which is the juvenile intake, to put procedures in place to divert more kids out of the court system. And we have created a restorative justice program with Restorative Arlington that both court services and my office are engaged with to use restorative justice for cases where the person who did the harm is between 16 and 26. Brain scientists know that the age of adolescence really is between 10 and 26, and that there's a tremendous amount of brain plasticity between those ages, and that we can actually truly, we can build empathy. We can do like serious rehabilitation, and those are sort of like the prime ages where we can really make a difference in people's lives and set them on a different track. So we created a restorative justice program for that age group. But I want to be clear that restorative justice is very victim-centered, and it's designed to hold the desires of the people who have been harmed and to encourage their healing. And do people sort of understand the difference between like a retributive system and a restorative system, or should I do a quick thing, or do you understand it? Quick thing? Okay. The easiest way for me to explain restorative justice is in contrast to retributive justice. And the retributive system essentially asks 3 questions. And this is very simplified, but it asks what law was broken, who broke it, and how should they be punished. In contrast, a restorative system asks what was the harm, what does the person harmed need to heal, and who is responsible for that healing. And so even in the formulation of those questions, you can see that the person who is harmed is at the center, their healing is at the center, and accountability in doing sorry and trying to make things right is at the center. And that's really important because, as I said earlier, it builds empathy, but it also punishment is an external motivator for people to do something or not to do something. And external motivators are not as powerful as internal motivators. And if you can develop a capacity for empathy, if you can develop a capacity for shame, if you can move those motivations internally to help somebody transform into a person who won't commit crimes again, what you have is, like I said, a safer community. You have fewer people being victimized, and you're promoting healing across the board. And to give you a sense of how dramatic the recidivism rates can be, in the restorative justice program the youth program that Fairfax has, if youth are given no diversion, they tend to recidivate at a rate of 64%. After a year. So that's with the normal criminal legal system. If they're given some degree of traditional diversion, like shoplifting classes and that sort of thing, it drops down to 33% recidivism rate, which is a huge difference. But when restorative justice is employed, that recidivism rate drops down to 13%. So it's not a magic tool, but it is an extremely effective tool in preventing crime in the long term, which is a huge benefit to the community. I want to make sure I have some time for questions, but I'm also trying to race through some of the other things that we've done. We're also trying to do preventative work, and so we're partnering with our fellow stakeholders like ACPD, APS, and the Court Services Unit to create what juvenile prevention uh, programming, which is really designed to teach kids, what the school code is, to teach kids what their rights are, and to teach kids, about the substance of criminal law and how it interacts with the things that they do at school. Now, we're not trying to do this in a school marmish way. What we've done is we've found an organization who creates a Jeopardy game. And so it's Juvenile Justice Jeopardy. And we're working with that organization to come into the community, create the game with the community so that it's responsive to our needs, and then license the game to the individual stakeholders so that we can then play the game with students and youth and, really get them to understand in a way that, where their minds are open to learning because it's a game. What is consent, why you don't bring BB guns to school, how to de-escalate situations with police, what are your rights, why, what is sexual harassment, what are school disciplinary rules, things like that, would just, have them glazed over and go over their head if it was a lecture format, but, having them really engaged in games. And Johns Hopkins has been studying the programming that we're looking at. And what they finding is that it's an effective intervention for disciplinary issues and violence and that sort of thing, and which we need in abundance after the school year that we had last year, where kids were bringing BB guns to school and there were just a lot of fights happening, and teachers were having some difficulty, probably because of their own trauma, dealing with kids. Obviously, some of the other advocacy that I've done is on cannabis reform. It's trying to expand the writ of actual innocence so that people can more easily go back and have their convictions reevaluated. We've created a conviction review unit in the office so that we can help with that. I supported no mandatory jury sentencing so that people can be sentenced by a judge who was going to have, a lot more options available to them, and options like suspending sentences, and options like, putting people in diversion, but also have like the range of, what is, a normal sentence for various kinds of, behavior, so that, it's viewed, the sentence is viewed in context of what other folks in Virginia are doing and what we've seen elsewhere. I supported abolition of the death penalty. I supported reform of the Freedom of Information Act. I was deeply involved in the police practices group and helping to create a community oversight board. And I supported the ACPD in creating a critical incident response team, where they have partnered with 12 other law enforcement agencies, so that when there is a lethal use of force in one community, that police department isn't investigating themselves. They have a different department takes the lead on the investigation. So right now, that CERT, there was a lethal use of force in Prince William County, and Arlington County is actually leading up that investigation. So that people are not investigating themselves, which is all about, system actor accountability. And we've been trying to engage in community transparency. I hope that you all receive my Justice Digest that we send out, that the office sends out. If not, please just Google Justice Digest, Arlington County Commonwealth Attorney, and sign up for it. I have created a community advisory board where, I have sort of regular meetings, and I have subcommittees on that to talk about some of the issues that are facing the community, and to help develop programming, and to really make sure that there's a two-way street. And we've tried to make that advisory board representative of zip codes and backgrounds, and the diversity of what Arlington is. And we have worked with, we still don't have data up and running, but we are working with various organizations to create, and we've hired a data person to really help be able to create what will one day be a system that can show our work and easily go in to see how cases are being resolved and why, to try to check on racial disparities and what's going on there. And we're undergoing a 2-year study to see how we've been doing on racial disparities with the policies that we've adopted, like refraining from using mandatory minimums, except for in certain circumstances. And the no cash bail policies and things like that. And so we really want to check our work to make sure that we're not, failing in any of our promises, and so that we can course correct if there's something that we can be doing better. On the horizon, one of the things that I've realized is that there's some victims that we treat really well in the system, or try to, sexual assault victims and domestic violence victims, and we have a lot in place for them. But if somebody is robbed, for example, there's not a lot out there, either in terms of restitution or in support. And so what I'm trying to do is add more, by talking to my legislators and advocating for, additional services for people who are, sort of like the wide variety of victim, including a huge thing, which is restitution. If your car gets stolen, you have $1,000 deductible, and insurance, covers everything, you still have that $1,000 deductible. And for some people, it won't be a big deal, but for a lot of people, $1,000 is a lot of money. And, there's no reason why you shouldn't get restitution. Even if a case doesn't go to trial, but if it does and the defendant is indigent, they're never going to be able to pay that, and which means you're never going to get restitution. And so I have proposed, creating a restitution fund that will pay victims out in advance so that they're not waiting for somebody's jail or prison term to be completed. But instead, getting their payment up front. And then on the back end, if somebody is able to pay and not paying, then they can face consequences of that. But if they're not paying because they're not able to pay, we want to make sure that we're not then criminalizing poverty in that sense. Because I've actually, my first week in office, I was sitting in court and a defense attorney came up to me and said, well, my client hasn't paid restitution. Is it okay if will you agree to him only being locked up for 2 weeks while he comes up with a payment plan? And I said, well, is being locked up for 2 weeks going to help him pay? And she says, well, no, but we'll come up with a plan. I said, well, is he going to get a job while he's in jail? And she says, no. And I said, this is absolutely ridiculous. 2 weeks is only going to make it harder for him to get a job, and it's only going to make it harder for him to pay. And so, I said very clearly, on my watch, we don't have, a pauper's jail. Like we're not incarcerating people because they can't afford to pay. But like that really inspired me to think about, how do we get this restitution paid in a way that satisfies people in the best, the most. So the idea is to have this fund that pays out early, and then people pay what they can when they can into it. And so it's, and we avoid people going to jail simply because they can't pay.
I know we want to save some time for questions, so why don't we start the
Sure.
question process, if
Sure.
that's okay.
Sure.
I'll ask the first question. With blue collar crime, there's always sort of detectives with gumshoe skills that investigate those. When it comes time to very sophisticated white collar financial crimes, you really need lawyers and accountants and so on. How is the investigation work of crimes divided between the police department and your office?
Well, we don't investigate. We have no investigators on staff, so we have no investigative ability. Um, we obviously ask ACPD to, follow up on certain things, and we work with more than just one law enforcement agency, and some of them are more equipped. Like the Virginia State Police are much better equipped to do financial crimes kind of investigations. Um, but ACPD, they don't take orders from our office, and so they don't investigate some of the things that I would really be interested in prosecuting, like wage theft. And so it's been hard to get traction on that because it tends to be, a heavy lift. It tends to be, not quite as complicated as some frauds, but it does tend to be more time intensive. And uh, I would love, like, one of the things that I would love to get for the office is an investigator to be able to help with that and to have some expertise in that. Not very many Commonwealth's offices. In fact, I'm aware of no Commonwealth attorneys' offices that have investigators, but DA's offices and state's attorneys' offices frequently have investigators in other jurisdictions. So that's something that I would like to see very much improved. But we do try to, work as closely as possible with ACPD, and some of the things are more challenging. We had some metadata that we needed investigated. And there's sort of one person at ACPD who has expertise in writing those search warrants, and so it took a really long time to get that search warrant written. And they don't like us to write the search warrants. So we're there to provide guidance to make sure that things are done in a legally appropriate way. We tend to work collaboratively for the bigger cases while they're being investigated before they even get charged. But at the end of the day, like, we could use some investigators of our own.
Thank you. Does someone else have a question? Steve Ferber?
Um, I'm not sure, but did Arlington Police have any part in the January 6th response? And have we, perhaps are we part of a case against the instigators of that mega crime?
So the ACPD did respond later in the day. Excuse me. They did respond later in the day to what was going on, which is part of the reason why we decided to institute a curfew, is because we knew that the curfew was going to push people who were in DC but staying in Arlington into Arlington, and we knew that our police force was going to be reduced. So they were involved in part of the response for that. We had a couple of cases of people, who were clearly here for that. But the
hiding
problem
hiding guns, was that some of that in Arlington, right?
the
And
problem is that that's not illegal. Is
yeah.
we need better laws in Virginia. Some of the things that we saw, for example, which I thought was really disturbing, were things like white phosphorus ammunition.
Okay.
We saw hollow point bullets, which, or not hollow point, excuse me. We saw hollow point, but we saw armor piercing bullets, which, like, those are designed to get through body armor
Cop
and to
killers.
kill
Yeah.
police officers and soldiers.
Yeah.
But those things are not illegal. And like, we would have had a lot more teeth, and been able to do a lot more for the folks who are storing this kind of stuff and walking around with this kind of um, ammunition. And I've proposed it repeatedly to the legislature, but haven't gotten a huge amount of traction. And with the state uh, leaders being who they are, not likely to. But we could have done a lot more if that kind of, clearly for war weaponry
Really?
is, it would were the possession of it were illegal in Arlington or in Virginia. And I think we need to do that because not just, because I think we haven't seen the end of these kinds of things. I think
Right.
Arlington has a lot of high value targets, and also Arlington is a place where people clearly stay and store ammunition, and we don't want to be that place.
And we did use some resources if we had uh, police over there. So did we add on to any cases trying to get recompense for that sort of thing?
Yes, there's some ACPD detectives that have been working very closely with the FBI and with and working on the prosecutions in DC.
Okay.
Next question. Anybody else? Herschel?
And Joan.
Parisa, I know that the smartest kids in the class always ask the best questions. And unfortunately, I have no question to ask. And you answered a whole bunch I never would have thought of. And I'm glad you were elected.
Thank you
thanks
so
for
much.
sharing this information with us. It's really interesting.
Herschel?
Yeah, I wonder what like the crime rate in Arlington or crime rate in Arlington relative to big cities or relative to Fairfax County. And I'm wondering what the campaign against you is, if there's anything at all.
Um, so different. So it's really hard to like completely understand what's gone on in the last couple of years because of COVID. But what I can tell you is that homicides around the nation went up an average of 30%. During that time period, we had no homicides in Arlington or the city of Falls Church. I'm not saying that I have sort of, a magic trick about, preventing homicide, but this is to say that, we are a very safe community. So property thefts have gone up and down, but Arlington has gone up less than Virginia and less than the rest of the nation. We've seen things like catalytic converters being stolen because of the precious metals that are contained in them. It's what is it, rhodium, palladium, and platinum. And they take about a minute to if you have the right tools to take off of a car, and you can sell them for almost $3,000. So we've seen things like that go up. But we're taking, those cases, particularly those cases where we're seeing sort of, people coming from out of the state. And I don't mean like the DMV area. I mean like where we're seeing people like very much involved in this on a national basis. We're taking those cases really seriously. And we have seen, some increase in like, people fighting each other. And I think that has a lot to do with the sort of mental health crisis that this country is in. Between 2020 and 2021, the rate of Americans saying that they were suffering from mental illness doubled. I think COVID changed our patterns of alcohol consumption. I think it sort of made us forget how to behave in public. I mean, that sounds really simplistic, but I think that our society has seen a lot of strain and a lot of trauma, and so we are seeing sort of increased fighting between people and increased drunken fighting between people. So
When they wanted to recall you, what was the allegation? Or did you have a recall thing?
I did have a recall. The three things that went out on the recall mailer. One of them was a gentleman who, in the middle of a mental health crisis, threw two dogs off of a balcony. And every single law enforcement officer who showed up at the scene said this person is clearly in a mental health crisis. and he ended up with a not guilty by reason of insanity verdict, and is getting treatment. Another of the allegations against me was that I said I was proud of somebody who had graduated from the behavioral health docket, and I was therefore proud of criminals. But we created the behavioral health docket so that we can give the services that people need and get them back on track. And I'm proud to say that the person I said I was proud of has stayed out of trouble, has a near full-time job, and has a place to live, and it has adjusted quite well after dealing with her mental health issues. And the other allegation was about somebody who had brought in a few hundred cartridges of hash oil and 50 pounds of marijuana and was caught at the airport. And his case is still not resolved, so I can't say very much about it. But what I can say is that he's now been on some form of probation for 4 years, and 4 years yeah, 4 years, and has not had a single dirty urine, has not had a single encounter with law enforcement, has become sober, has gone to and has immediately started working, and has is getting certified in a union construction skill trade, so that he will have stability and employment. And he's one of those people that had a tremendous amount of pretrial support, and so was really able to be rehabilitated because he had family that could connect him to people who owned a restaurant and to people who could get him into training for a union trade. And I think if we had more support systems like that for more people, and it wasn't just based on your family, I think we would see a lot more success stories like that. But yes, I was criticized because we wanted him to be on 2.5 more years of probation, and then we would reduce his possession with intent to distribute marijuana to felonies to misdemeanor possession with intent to distribute marijuana. So he would still have the character of what he did on his record, but he wouldn't be facing mandatory minimum felonies. And the court that is still under advisement. The court still has done nothing about that case. Yeah.
Steve Ferber, you have another question?
Yeah, quick one. I don't know how much you follow the individual, kind of crimes, but there was a stabbing on the bike trail over near Washington Boulevard and Glebe Road a month or so ago. And I was just wondering if you'd heard if there was any progress on finding, the perpetrator there.
So I follow these cases, but because they're open investigations, I really can't say anything about them.
But nobody has been arrested. You can't even say that.
I mean, I can say that because it's not.
Yeah, that would be public record.
If I'm thinking about the right case, I don't think that anyone's been arrested. But I couldn't tell you anything more because it's an open investigation.
Sure. Okay. All right.
And that's really to protect the integrity of the investigation. And once somebody does get arrested, it's, there are very strict ethical rules about what public statements lawyers are allowed to make.
Of course. Yeah.
And that's a very important point. And we appreciate you abiding by those very important rules. I think that sort of completes the questions. But before we adjourn, I was hoping to ask Mark Teal to just give us a 2-minute update on the various campaigns and how we're moving into Election Day, which is less than a month away. Mark, do you want to just say 1 or 2 words?
Sure. I guess there's still a gold card event to come, I think this weekend, right? I don't know. Everyone has gold card tickets.
The 15th is the Golden Gala. for those of you
Right.
who are into gold or galas.
One of the things we're really trying to push with Matt and Bethany's campaigns is canvassing, and that's something that's a little bit challenging this year because there's not a statewide race here in Arlington, and Don Byers not as concerned, I think, about his opponent as Matt and Bethany might be. So we kind of had to set that up from scratch, but we're doing that every Saturday. We'll actually be launching from Michaela Pond's house near Central Arlington this Saturday, and Don Byer will be there to help recruit folks. Another area we haven't done anything in that I'm hoping we'll start organizing is something that goes back to before COVID is metro flyering, actually handing out leaflets and stuff by the metro. And I think there are people there, and especially one of the challenges we have in Arlington, people know about the divide between single family homes and the multi-unit buildings. We can knock on doors in single family homes, but we have a much harder time knocking on doors in the multi-unit buildings. So in getting those people to vote, they're usually solid Democrats, but they don't vote in as big a numbers. So metro flyering might be one way that we can help bring those numbers up. The campaigns are doing digital advertising. Arlington Dems is doing digital advertising. Let's see. I guess, and of course, I'm sure everyone knows, early voting is going on now, Monday to Friday at the county building. On October 25th, the two satellite locations will open up. That's Madison Community Center and the Walter Reed Community Center. So what I'm hearing, not just here in Arlington, but around Virginia, unfortunately, the numbers of people voting are down a little bit from past years, and what we'd like to see. An optimistic take on that might be that more people are planning to vote on election day because there's less concern about COVID, but there's also the concern that it just might be less people voting. I think that definitely is a concern for Democrats. So if you talk to your friends and neighbors and can convince them to vote early is always nice, because then the party and the candidates can devote more resources to the less reliable voters on election day. I think that covers about all that I'm working on. Obviously, I'm working on Matt's campaign again, and in Bethany, Michelle Woolley, who Parisa knows well, is helping out Bethany, and I guess that covers it.
Thank you so much for that update, Mark. And we also want to deeply thank Parisa for taking the time to visit with us today. I know she has a very busy schedule as Commonwealth's attorney, and we do appreciate her making the time to visit with us. Next,
It is
next
absolutely my pleasure. And know that my door is always open for you all and for all of my constituents for questions, feedbacks, just a chat. So thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. And next month meeting coincides with election day, so I think we'll probably have a brief program, but I really haven't figured what that is yet. But I hope most of you spend most of the day at the polling places. So we will now adjourn until election day in November. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you for having me.